Yeah, so what we're trying to do with this paper is we're trying to ask a new research question and use that as a basis to develop a new theory. So that new question would be whether supply chain management strategies can ever be really environmentally effective, so whether they can really contribute towards the protection of natural capital or not. So as part of that new theory, I think what we need is a new dependent variable. So what we really need to talk about is environmental effectiveness and the protection of natural capital. And as part of that, we really need to be talking about the tensions that exist within sustainable supply chain management strategies, and using that those tensions really as the basis to develop interesting theory going forwards. Yeah, so I think the main idea here is sustainability itself, which may sound like a very basic concept to be drawing upon, but I think the main point, or one of the main points of the paper really, is we haven't really explored what sustainability really means within the literature. We've often based it on a very narrow definition of that term. So one of the points we're trying to really make with this paper is that sustainability is an essentially contested concept, and exploring just the diversity of meanings that this concept has, and then using that as a basis for theory development. I think the other theory, the other concept really that's important that I've already mentioned is environmental effectiveness. Again, I think we assume that supply chain management strategies will have some kind of positive environmental effect, but we don't really demonstrate that, and we certainly don't demonstrate it in terms of how it would contribute towards the protection of natural capital. And I think that's the other important concept related to that, is the concept of natural capital itself, and thinking about whether supply chains can play a role in protecting that, or whether they are always going to involve its destruction. And I think that's a much more interesting conversation to have, perhaps, than some of the ones we have been having to date. Yeah, so what we're trying to do here with this paper really is we're not trying to say that there is one right way of looking at sustainable supply chain management. What we're trying to do is take a more pluralistic approach to this and point out that there are multiple ways forward for us to go. So one of the ways in which our framework can be used is to look at these alternative ways of developing theory and using these as a way of raising new questions to be answered. So, for example, we could ask whether supply chain management is really able to deliver the radical increases in resource productivity within the utilitarian paradigm. We could use the constructionist paradigm to look much more at how people make sense of sustainability. We could use the systemic paradigm to really look at the contribution that supply chains can make towards the protection of natural capital. And then we can use the critical paradigm in order to really explore the ideology of sustainability and the role that our own theories might play in that. So we can use all of those paradigms independently to develop theory, or we can also start thinking about the tensions between those different paradigms and start trying to build theory across them, which is where theories will be more paradoxical, more multi-level, and perhaps more interesting and all-encompassing.
Well, the paper really is about trying to drive the field of sustainability, sustainable supply chain management forward, particularly from a theoretical angle, and trying to drive theory forward. So we propose a framework in the paper and trying to sort of expand the boundaries of SSCM by looking at how it could, be looking at different paradigms to build theory, really, essentially. So I'd say if I were to sum up the two main points about the conclusions that we reached, it would be, number one, that the field of SSCM could really capitalize on interdisciplinary opportunities and collaborate with researchers in other disciplines where sustainability has been the topic of research for quite a long while. So, for instance, we've identified opportunities to collaborate with scientists in the natural sciences, perhaps to try and use more objective measures of ecological resilience and how to actually achieve absolute reduction in ecological impact. I think there are also opportunities to collaborate with people who may work in more sort of action-orientated disciplines, such as development studies, that would link very much to the paradigm around critical thinking, and that would be around driving change forward and what theories do scientists in these disciplines actually draw from, and what could we learn from them. And embrace in SSCM from a supply chain point of view. And I'd say perhaps the most overarching conclusion, which is the second bit, would be that actually I think we started from the premise, perhaps SSCM has reached a sort of a dead end where it's going. But actually, after we finished the paper, I think the conclusion is that there is so much more that can be done, and if we start embracing paradigm plurality, then there's so many different avenues for researchers in the future, and I think the future is bright for the field. So that would be my summary of the main conclusions, really.
Now, I think practitioners should look at our paper from at least two angles. First, to be careful on the kind of findings they can draw from the existing literature, as we show that often conclusions rely on subjective data, and there are limits to it when it comes to the actual impact on sustainability and sustainable supply chain management. Now, we also offer practitioners this call for collaboration, because as we show that we need objective data, for example, and we need engaged methodologists to build better theories and an advanced theory in sustainable supply chain management. Engaged methodologists rely on the collaboration with practitioners to occur and to be successful. So it's also a call for managers to engage with academia, so that we are talking basically about industry, academia collaboration, and we need that to produce better research, basically. Another important aspect for practitioners is that we call for diversity and plurality in order to produce and advance theory in sustainable supply chain management. And practitioners can play a key role in diversity, because we need to bring together not only business academics, but the business managers. We can also bring in engineers and other subject areas that can help us to produce, to use this diversity to produce better theories.
Well, I see multiple streams of research emerging, and I feel like perhaps currently the field of sustainable supply chain management has been sort of dominated by a mainstream, and that would be true for any discipline. But I feel that the future looks like there are going to be multiple streams living alongside each other and doing relevant research to sustainable supply chain management and being complementary potentially. And I think I see the field moving forward theoretically with more attempts to problematize the existing assumptions, to engage critically with the issue of, there may be paradoxes in trying to maintain our current, level of economic activity and not damage the environment, and also not do harm to societies, and trying to really sort of, kind of explore these tensions. I see also future research being more engaged, participatory. I think there is an increasing recognition that we need to be driving practice, and I think we're not the only ones who've called for that kind of research. The work of Marques and Anton Shevchenko and other authors such as Montalban and Pagel and Wu again, they've also called for such change in paradigm, and I think the future research in SSCM will be about driving practice, which will mean not just practice and industry, but also working alongside practitioners in the public sector, perhaps policymakers at local communities, and doing research that is perhaps more action driven. It has currently not been the mainstream, and I think the future looks like it's gonna be more about that, perhaps not to the detriment of other approaches. As I said, I think it's going to be multiple streams, but I think these approaches will gain in legitimacy.